That Severance TV show seems to be kind of the talk of the town lately, and CNBC tracked down the guy who bought the actual office building that was featured on the show. A car collector in Florida built his dream mansion outfitted with some insane features, including a $1 million swimming pool. And Larry Ellison is developing an ultra-luxury resort that's supposedly going to rival President Trump's nearby Mar-a-Lago property. We've got all that, plus a couple more stories to talk about in this week's episode of Real Estate Report. Let's get into it. For our first story of the day, let's talk about that car collector mansion that was just built in Florida. This place is owned by a guy named Alex Moeller. He's a social media consultant who traveled to 95 countries before buying this property in 2020. Then he went on to build out something that he designed himself from the ground up. Every single room in the house is inspired by one of his favorite hotels that he stayed in. Even the backyard draws inspiration from a Caribbean resort. Now, this is not the most insane listing in the world, you guys. We've definitely looked at crazier here on the channel in the past, but there's a few details that I do want to look at with you guys together, starting with the backyard. So here's the backyard, here's the $1 million swimming pool, and here is a Lamborghini in the corner of the backyard that's made to look like it's floating in the swimming pool. What he did with his Lambo is he basically parked it on a bed of concrete that looks like it was probably painted with like a glossy black epoxy. It does kind of have that effect that it's floating on water, but I'm not gonna lie, as much as I love cars, it also kind of feels like a Lamborghini doesn't belong in your backyard. It has a weird mix of different styles of architecture. We can flip through a couple of these interior photos real quick, I guess. So we got the living moss wall here in this seating area with some dirty windows. Very cool dining room. I absolutely love these chairs. Here are a few shots of the kitchen. I'm assuming that behind the bar, this is supposed to be one of those like temperature controlled wine rooms, except there's no wine racks and no wine bottles. So it kind of looks like the bar is just sitting in front of a shower. Check out the faucet on the wall in this powder room. It goes in between these two sections of mirror. The master bedroom feels a lot like a hotel. I guess I could say the same thing about the master bathroom. The movie theater has a glass panel that looks into a section of your garage. So you can park your supercar on the other side of that glass and look at your car while you're watching a movie. That is awesome. I think the biggest takeaway here is that if you ever plan to sell your house, it's not a good idea to draw inspiration from 95 different countries when you're building your house. Because what's going to happen is you're going to end up with 95 different styles in your house, and unfortunately, that's going to make it a little bit harder to sell. Moving on, this story is wild. So the city of Las Vegas just issued a $180,000 fine to a homeowner for illegally operating an Airbnb out of his property. But the homeowner says he's not going to pay it. What happened here is we've got a guy named Xin Tao who lives full-time in Oregon, but he bought an investment property in Las Vegas in June of 2021. After closing on his purchase, he signed a long-term 24-month lease with a new tenant named Ryan Murphy. The thing is, though, Ryan never moved into this house. He actually signed the lease and then went on to convert the home into an Airbnb. It might sound weird to some of you guys that this happened, but this is actually a somewhat common business practice. They call it Airbnb arbitrage, and some people build up some pretty serious businesses doing this. The goal for an Airbnb arbitrage investor is to sign a long-term lease with a landlord for, say, 24 months at a standard lease rate of, let's say, $2,000 per month. Then that investor completely furnishes the home. They list it for rent on Airbnb. Then they collect rent of, let's say, $5,000 per month from their Airbnb bookings. Not a horrible business model, because if you're making $5,000 per month from Airbnb, but you only owe your landlord $2,000 per month in rent, then you're making about $3,000 per month on this house without ever having to purchase it. The thing is, though, if you are going to do this Airbnb arbitrage thing, you're supposed to, for one, get approval from your landlord first, and for two, you still need to follow all of the local rules and regulations. It's hard telling what really happened in this case, but Tao started renting the property to Murphy in November of 2021. And by December of 2021, the city was already calling, saying that the home was being illegally used as a short-term rental. The Las Vegas rules for short-term rentals are strict. Homeowners are supposed to actually stay on site with guests. They also need a special permit, and The property needs to be at least 660 feet from another rental. So if the city was calling the owner after this home was only listed for a month on Airbnb, then that tells us that this home probably never received a permit to be a short-term rental. Well, somehow the home still stayed on Airbnb regardless, with neighbors regularly calling the cops over noise complaints and an overflow of cars that were parked up and down the street. Well, fast forward to today, Ryan Murphy's lease is up. He moves out of the house and takes all of his furnishings with him. Tao flies out to Las Vegas to check in on his property. And what does he find when he gets there? A notice that's posted on the front door from Vegas that says that he owes them $180,000 for the 2-year illegal operation of a short-term rental. The tenant Murphy is denying any wrongdoing here. He says he made it crystal clear that his intention was to rent out this house on Airbnb when he originally signed the lease. The owner's trying to get Murphy to pay the $180,000 fine plus damages, which Murphy says is not going to happen. Pretty dramatic situation, but stuff happens. What surprises me the most about this whole story is the fact that this fine was able to grow to $180,000. Like, if this was $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000, that would sound about right to me, but 180 is hard to comprehend. Definitely makes me not want to be a landlord in Las Vegas. Next, let's talk about the Severance Building for a second. So I don't know what it is, but it seems like everybody is talking about this Severance TV show right now. It's a good show, I get it, but what I thought was cool is that CNBC actually was able to track down and interview the guy who owns the office building that was featured in the show.
My name is Ralph Zucker. I'm the president and CEO of Inspired by Somerset Development, the developers of Bell Works, and I purchased Bell Works in 2013.
First of all, if you've never seen or heard of Severance, it's basically a psychological thriller show that's centered around a cult-like company called Lumen. It has their employees undergo a severance procedure that allows them to give people 2 personalities, one that they have at work and then another that they have outside of work. Kind of confusing. With this show largely being based in an office, the producers obviously needed to find an appropriate space for their filming, and they chose a building in Holmdel, New Jersey called the Bell Works Building.
I knew a little bit of where I wanted to go design-wise. There was a location manager at the time who brought up to me Bell Labs, and we looked at it, and obviously our heads exploded, and we went to see it, and it had been restored. It was cathartic. It's like they just finished it. It was meant to be. What I love about Bell Labs is that it is similar to the show in some ways. Originally, Bell Labs was building a community of all these amazing engineers and technicians to live, to raise their families. They shared everything. Like, they had farmers markets, they had all these sort of things, and that was so beautiful and interesting. And it's like, Lumen's sort of the same, just took the wrong path.
This is a monstrous property of over 2 million square feet of interior space, sitting on nearly 500 acres of land, originally designed by Saarinen when it was constructed back in 1959. It was almost abandoned though at one point, but thanks to the current owner who bought the building for just $27 million, this office building is back up and running and thriving.
When I first walked into the empty Bell Labs building, I found the building devoid of life. We could take this great atrium, turn it into a pedestrian street, bring life into the building. That original vision, it took 5 long and painful years to get all the different myriad of regulatory agencies and stakeholders that had to be convinced that this could actually become a reality.
I love that the buyer of this place saw the potential. I love that he was able to buy it for $27 million and sink another $270 million to bring it back to life.
They put a lot of money into it, and they created something that's got a library now. It's got kids nursing, it's got everything. It's like, it's the same kind of community-based idea.
And let's be real, in a day and age where so many people are working from home and wanting to continue to work from home, it's pretty cool and refreshing to see that this guy has created an office environment at Bell Works that people actually want to go to.
You don't need to sever somebody's brain to get them back into the office.
Sticking to the Hollywood theme, check this out. So the ghost town where part of the movie The Hunger Games was filmed 13 years ago just hit the market. It's a unique property called the Henry Mill Village, and they're only asking $1.95 million bucks. For this listing, we're headed to Hickory, North Carolina. There's actually 2 separate properties, which include a total of 30 residential homes, 20 mill homes that were built in 1905, and these are all sitting on almost 100 acres of land. AD says that this is the last intact mill village in the state. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and since the village was featured as District 12 in the original Hunger Games movie, it has been a tourist attraction ever since. Here's listing number 1 asking $1.15 million, and then here is listing number 2, which is asking $800,000. The draws here are, for 1, the big mill village; for 2, the fact that this was on the Hunger Games; for 3, it's a bit of an investment property. There's a renovated Airbnb on this lot. They're doing daily tours here. They have a 6,000 square foot general store. I'm gonna guess this is the only actual livable home on the entire lot right now. But then surrounding that main house, there's all these other little structures. I could totally see this being developed into like a tiny home village. Anyways, here's one of the many structures that needs a lot of love. But inside that Airbnb property, it was renovated and finished actually really nice. Like, I'd totally stay here. This is probably that big general store they were talking about, which from here appears to be also abandoned. And over on the second listing, they give us a couple more photos just of the surrounding land area, a couple more of those structures that are still standing, but they need major overhauls. Just for fun, we can run the numbers on this deal and see if it pencils out. So let's say someone buys this place for $2 million bucks. They get all the land and all these half-built structures that are kind of rotting away. They probably need to put another $2 million bucks just into renovating everything that's here. So now they're into the deal for $4 million, and there's going to be a bunch of expenses associated with this property if you converted it into a little Airbnb tiny home village. But let's say the expenses run a couple $100,000 per year. That means that to get a decent return, you want this thing to generate at least $600,000 per year for the numbers to pencil out. This is just very quick back of the napkin math. If it's making $50,000 a year right now with just one property, I don't think it's all that unrealistic to say that it could make as much as $600,000 or $700,000 per year if there were 30 built-out properties on this land. Also, it doesn't hurt that a prequel to the Hunger Games is going to be coming out soon. Anyways, it's always fun looking at opportunities like this. It's a very niche category. I probably won't be the one turning this into a tiny home village, but I'll say this: I hope someone does. Now, we're really going all over the U.S. today, you guys. It's time that we talk about Florida. Larry Ellison is in the process of building an ultra-luxury resort that is supposed to possibly rival Mar-a-Lago. Larry has already got around $450 million worth of real estate just in Florida alone, and his latest venture is to transform an aging hotel near Palm Beach. This all started in August of 2024 when Larry dropped $277 million for Manalapan's largest structure, the Palm Beach Resort and Spa. And apparently his mission or his objective with this purchase is to turn this hotel into one of the top resorts in the world. Ellison has already got experience in this industry. He has had success with the Four Seasons Resort in Hawaii and the Nobu in Malibu. And this buy in Florida is a good fit for his hospitality portfolio. The location has been a hot spot for celebrities and high net worth people since the 1950s, although in more recent years, reports are saying that even though the hotel maintains a pretty solid rating online, it is starting to appear a bit dated and worn, and it very much needs a refresh. Not surprisingly, locals are actually pretty excited about Larry potentially dumping a bunch of money into this hotel. I mean, him doing this will, in theory, attract even more millionaires and billionaires to the area, which will give the local economy a boost. Another factor that a local realtor calls out as a positive for Ellison's resort is that it's just 20 minutes away from Trump's estate, Mar-a-Lago. So you might be able to look at this as a potential extension of the Mar-a-Lago Club as a go-to Florida destination for the super rich. This other Palm Beach story that came up this last week too is a perfect example of how billionaires are just literally dumping money into the Palm Beach area. This guy actually is taking over a public street to expand his compound. His name is Paul Tudor Jones. He's a hedge fund billionaire that's building a waterfront compound. Part of his plans require him to incorporate part of an existing public street. He actually just received approval for it too. Realtor.com reported that he was able to acquire this section of street for just 220 grand, which means that now he's going to be able to combine his 3 contiguous properties into one massive estate. Of course, his neighbors aren't happy. They're worried about stuff like how our emergency service is going to get in here. They're worried about parking, stuff like that. But as they say, more money, more problems. That's a wrap for this week's episode. I'm kind of enjoying this format where we talk about a bunch of stories all in one video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I'll see you next week.